Hi guys, this video is going to be our introduction to writing a proof. I know you've probably heard about writing proofs from past geometry students and they say it's the worst thing ever. I promise they're actually not that bad. A proof is just logically writing out how to solve a problem. So we're going to start today with algebra proofs because we know how to solve algebra problems. And then in future days, we'll move on to geometry proofs, so they'll get a little bit harder just because the content will be new as well. Do not bother writing down anything on this slide. In class, I'll give you a note card with all these things on them, and technically, you already know all of this from algebra. You might not remember the specific names, but they're pretty easy to figure out. Like if you add something to both sides of an equation, it's the addition property of equality. And again, in class, you will have this card to reference. So when writing a proof, our first step is to make a two-column table. And technically, the way this is phrased, it isn't a proof. Typically, with a proof, we'll have to prove something. Like with a geometry proof, it's usually proving two segments are congruent. But with algebra, it doesn't exactly work that way. The left-hand side is going to be us actually doing the problem. We call that our statement. And then the right-hand side is why we can do that. So we call that the reason. So our first step, every single time we do a proof, is to write down the problem. X plus 7 equals 12. After we write a statement, we have to give the reason we can do that. Well, in this case, it is the problem that we're trying to solve. That's a lot of words. So we're going to be lazy and just write the word given because it was given to us. My next step when solving this equation would be to subtract 7 on each side. So I'm going to do that. Would cancel over there. I get x equals 5. That's my answer, but I'm not done. I have to write down how I know that x equals 5. Well, I used subtraction. So that is technically the subtraction property of equality. If you want to be lazy for now and just write subtraction, that's fine. Once we get into more geometry stuff, we'll have like properties of equality and properties of congruence. But for now, just writing this word subtraction is okay. Let's try out another one. We're going to solve this problem and justify each step as we go. Our first step is to make a table. I'm going to be lazy. I don't want to rewrite the problem, so I'll put my table right there. I'm going to write down the reason that I do every single step. So the first thing was writing down the problem. We're just going to write given because that's the problem. It was given to us. Next thing I would do when solving this equation is to multiply each side by 5. So on the left, I'd have x. On the right, 6 times 5 is 30. And then I have to write the reason. I know that. Well, I used multiplication. So we'll say that is the multiplication property of equality. And again, if you want to be lazy and just write multiplication, that is okay for now. We'll do a little bit longer problem so you can kind of see the flow of a proof when we start to get multiple statements and reasons in there. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the problem. So I've got 8y plus 3 equals 15y minus 12. Make a table. The reason I can do that first thing is because it is given to me. Sometimes if our tables get really, really long, we can number them so you can see where each step is. So our first statement is 8y plus 3 equals 15y minus 12. And the reason for that is given. And then I'll add in my second thing. My next step when solving this problem, and there are multiple ways you could do it, I think I'm going to subtract 8y on each side. So that will get me to 3 equals 15 minus 8 would be 7y minus 12. And then justify what you just did. Well, I just used subtraction. So that is the subtraction property of equality. Next thing I'm going to do when solving this problem, I think I will add 12 onto each side. So 3 plus 12 is 15. That'll be equal to 7y. And then justify it, write down what you did. Well, I just used addition. That is the addition property of equality. And then we've got one final step. We want to get y by itself. So I'm going to divide each side by 7. I think I'm going to be lazy. I'm just going to leave this as 15/7 equal to y. If you want to get it as a decimal, go for it. That was the fourth thing I did. And you don't need these numbers. Just some people like them because it makes it look a little bit more organized. And I could do that because of the division property of equality. All right, I think we'll tack one more on this video. 13 minus c equals 10. Solve this guy for c and justify each statement. So I'll start by making a table. First thing I'll do, I think I'm going to subtract 13 on each side. So that'll get me to negative c equals negative 3. And I actually forgot to write down my first step. Some people like to do the whole problem and add their steps after. Typically, I'll do 1-to-1, so add them as I go. But the first thing I did was make my table and write down my problem. The reason is just it's given. It's the first thing that we did. The next thing I did was I subtracted 13 on each side. That is the subtraction property of equality. And then right now I've got a negative c. I want that to be a positive c. So I'm going to divide each side by negative 1. Negative 3 divided by negative 1 would be a positive 3. And I'm going to call it the division property of equality. You could also have multiplied each side by negative 1. If you did that, you would use the multiplication property of equality. You'll start to see as we do more proofs that there are typically multiple ways they can be done. Typically, there's one way that's more efficient than the other ways, but there are always multiple ways to get to the same place.